Good morning. I hope that yesterday you really had some wonderful opportunities to attend some of the exciting and engaging and some thought-provoking sessions, connect or reconnect with your colleagues, view the professional and student posters, and particularly get the biggest sugar high in the Midwest at the amazing Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I saw a few James Brown imitations that I don't even want to think about. So good for you. We're particularly grateful to Atlas Systems and Preservation Technologies who did support that wonderful all-attendee reception. I would also encourage you to make sure to visit the exhibit hall today and thank our very many industry sponsors and partners for coming and find out what they have to offer. Every year there's a new and amazing array, so do check in and take home swag. Now, I want to mention, in keeping with the changing way we're doing things this year, thanks to the incredible work of the Annual Meetings Task Force, we've decided this year to call this the Leadership Plenary. It's a bit of a variation on the traditional presidential address. The Society, in fact, and in truth, is guided by a combination of groups and individuals, not one monolithic, strange person who shows up once a year. So we really want to share with you this morning the perspectives from Helen Wong Smith on behalf of Council, Dennis Meissner as your incoming president, and from me regarding the strategic directions, the plans, and the accomplishments that we've all worked on as a partnership, as a group. Tomorrow you'll hear from the fourth part of our leadership team, Treasurer Mark Duffy, who will be talking at the business meeting. So together, that's really all of your SAA leadership exposing itself to you and letting you know where we all together are trying to take the society. So let's begin the focus by putting the spotlight on leadership that is developing, and we've already made agreements on what they're going to wear when they're president, so that they at least meet my standards of bow ties and purple dresses and that sort of thing. So I'm honored to share the stage, or turn the stage over to the incomparable, truly incomparable Stephen Booth, who is the SAA Awards Committee Chair. So let's get started. Please welcome Stephen, who is the best.
Good morning. My name is Stephen Booth, and together with Sue Hamburger, it has been our great pleasure to co-chair the awards committee for the 2014-2015 award cycle. With more than 21 recognitions given out by SAA, it takes a profession to make it happen. We are grateful to the more than 70 volunteers who served on the various selection committees, and to those of you who took the time to nominate someone for an award. We received 146 nominations this year, which represents a 20% increase from last year. So thank you so much. This morning, we will salute our Student and Travel Award recipients, and this evening at 6 p.m., we'll pay tribute to a dozen other awardees during a ceremony in this same room. I hope you will join us then, too. And now, moving on to our ceremony for today, and assisting me is the incoming chair of the awards committee, Gerald Shadrow. Paige Holman is the recipient of the Theodore Calvin Pease Award for Superior Writing Achievement by a student of Archival Studies. She is a student in the dual Master of Archival Studies, Master of Library and Information Studies degree program at the University of British Columbia. Her paper, titled On Impartiality and Interrelatedness, Reactions to Jenkinsonian Appraisal in the 20th Century, was nominated by Dr. Luciana Durante. You'll be able to read Paige's award-winning work when it is published in the American Archivists next spring. Congratulations, Paige. Our next recipient is Noah Geraci for the F. Gerald Ham and Elsie Ham Scholarship for a graduate student in Archival Studies at a university in the United States. Noah is pursuing a Master of Library and Information Science degree at the University of California, Los Angeles, and will receive $7,500 in financial support. Congratulations, Noah.
You can't be here. Thank you. I wish I was Noah.
The recipient of the Mosaic Scholarship is Desiree Anais, who is beginning the master's program in Library and Information Science with an Archives Management concentration at Simmons College this fall. The $5,000 prize provides funding to students who manifest a commitment both to the archival profession and to advancing diversity concerns within it. Congratulations, Desiree. Maria Sanchez Tucker is the recipient of the Josephine Foreman Scholarship, the $10,000 scholarship established by the General Commission on Archives and History of the United Methodist Church, supports minority students pursuing graduate education in archival science and promotes the diversification of the American archives profession. Maria is a master's student in the Library and Information Science program at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. Congratulations, Maria. The recipient of the Donald Peterson Student Travel Award is Colin Post, who is earning a master's degree from the School of Information and Library Science at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, where he is also participating in a fellowship program, Learning from Artists' Archives. The Peterson Award supports students and recent graduates within North America to attend SAA's annual meeting. Colin participated in the research forum on Tuesday and presented his research paper titled Voices from Every Angle, an approach to archiving the event. Congratulations, Colin. This year, we have two recipients of the Harold T. Pinkett Minority Student Award, which recognizes students of African, Asian, Latino, or Native American descent who, through scholastic achievement, manifest an interest in becoming professional archivists and active members of SAA. Talia Guzman Gonzalez is a graduate student in the College of Information Studies at the University of Maryland, College Park. She already holds a PhD in Portuguese and currently volunteers at the Smithsonian Latino Center. As an archivist, she will advocate for the presence of minorities as users and also make sure that their contributions to society are documented in the archival record. Congratulations, Talia. Also receiving the Pinkett Minority Student Award is Rachel Winston, who is earning her Master's of Science in Information Studies degree at the University of Texas at Austin. Rachel is committed to advocating for and working with collections and materials related to the African American and Black diaspora experience, which is illustrated through her work on the Texas Domestic Slave Trade Project at UT Austin. Congratulations, Rachel. Mary Grace Golfo, a student in the master's program in archival studies at the University of Manitoba, is the recipient of the Oliver Wendell Holmes Travel Award, which enables international archivists who are training or studying in the United States or Canada to augment their experience by traveling to SAA's annual meeting. Mary Grace is a Filipino citizen and is on leave as assistant professor in the School of Library and Information Studies at the University of the Philippines. Upon graduating from the University of Manitoba, she plans to return to the Philippines to lead and develop the country's first formal graduate degree program in archival studies. Congratulations, Mary Grace. And at this time, President Roe would also like to recognize several other students. But before she does, please come out this evening at 6 p.m. in this same room where we'll acknowledge and recognize some other awardees. Thank you so much.
The Association of Research Libraries and the Society of American Archivists have partnered to develop a diversity recruitment program that expands SAA's own Mosaic Scholarship Program. This is funded by a 3-year grant from the Institute of Museum and Library Services, and ARL and SAA will provide a total of 15 master's students in archival science or special collections librarianship with financial support, paid internships in libraries and archives, mentoring relationships, leadership development, and career placement assistance. The charter class was recognized last year, and I would not like to invite the 2015 class of ARL SAA Mosaic Program Fellowships to stand and be recognized as I call your names. They are really wonderful people. Micah Broadnax, who's studying at Simmons College. You have to keep standing, but we need to know. Joanna Chen Cham of the University of California, Los Angeles. Adriana Flores of Simmons College. Harvey Long of the University of Wisconsin at Madison. And Sarah Powell of Simmons College also. We're delighted to have all 5 of you among us, and you're not going anywhere now. We gotcha. You can sit down. It's okay. Or you can stand up for the rest of the time. I'm good with that. We're dispensing with those formal flowery introductions that commonly come with the presidential address so that we can focus on providing the perspectives from those of us who have been involved in leadership this year. So first you're going to hear from my absolutely wonderful and highly esteemed by me and I know by all of you, Helen Wong Smith, who's representing SAA Council. She'll be talking about a critical initiative that Council has committed itself to and to bringing forward to the Society. It will be launching in the coming year to focus our attention on a very critical issue of cultural competency. Following Helen, Dennis Meissner, our incoming president, will share with you his plans for taking us forward in the next year so that we can really strengthen our capacity to raise awareness of the value of archives and the work of archivists. And then finally, I will offer my parting thoughts, but parting for this year, I will never stop talking, on what we've done and learned about archival advocacy over the past year of living dangerously for archives. So without further ado, I'm going to turn the stage over to Helen.
Aloha. I'm here to share why Council has adopted the development process of cultural diversity competence. When I greeted you with aloha, it is not a gimmick to distinguish myself as a native resident of a desirable vacation spot, but as a cultural identity with its own set of mores, responsibilities, and traditions. Without cultural awareness and skills, operational gridlock can occur at great cost to the workplace, but more importantly, to the communities we serve. This situation has stimulated the concern of people engaged in business, education, health, human services, and criminal justice. And their concern has led to an increasing emphasis on the formal training of employees in cultural diversity competence in an effort to create culturally competent organizations. Such organizations have congruent structures, policies, programs, protocols, and processes that enable the entire system to work effectively with culturally diverse people. How are we to expand the archival record and share the importance of archives as essential evidence of society, especially to traditionally underrepresented communities in our collections, if we are unable to effectively work and communicate with the diversity of cultures? And I'm not limiting this to ethnicity around us. While serving on our Committee on Education in 2008 and 9, I surveyed diversity initiatives of 26 academic programs and 35 regional groups. Initiatives ranged from producing bilingual material to curriculum for urban librarianship to a PhD level course on documenting diversity to arrange and describe African American collections related to students' disciplines such as performing arts, literature, and history. Supplementing these worthy efforts, Council has accepted my proposal to offer cultural diversity competence training to address the elements on the cultural competence continuum. These range from cultural destructiveness. I make a conscious effort to use my power to destroy cultures that are different from my own or from what I think will work best for others. We are all that is important. Cultural incapacity. I am unwilling to be useful or helpful to other cultures. We take care of our own. Cultural denial or indifference. I believe that culture, color, and dimensions of diversity are unimportant. All people are the same. Cultural precompetence. I realize that my responses to cultural differences are more often than not culturally destructive, and I'm trying to understand how to respond culturally competently. You often have nice written policies, but limited actions. The operative word is trying. Cultural competence. I hold a commitment to social and economic justice by fostering mutual adaptation to difference to create environments that are useful for all. Cultural proficiency. I hold culture in high esteem, and that is my organizing frames of reference and the foundation by which I understand relationships between individuals, groups, organizations, systems. Your efforts are optimal, universal, inclusive, and proficient. Progression on the continuum can be achieved with the following skills. 1, understand culture as multi-level and multi-dimensional, comprising of personal, subcultures, mainstream national culture, and organization cultures. Skill 2, understand the barriers to effective relationships, language, nonverbal communication, judgment, stress, stereotyping and discrimination, organization or institution-wide barriers. 3, practice culturally competent, centered communication. And skill 4, design and implement organization-wide cultural competence elements available. Needless to say, this is an active process, which includes the sometimes messy elements exploring cultural relativism, which includes self-reflection and non-judgment, EMEC contextualization and comparison, obtaining information on attitudes, values orientations, and social relations directly from the people involved. And finally, accepting a holistic approach to change. I invite you to join Council in adopting the precepts of cultural diversity competency and experience the benefits it brings to you, your collections, and your communities. Mahalo.
Good morning, everybody. Ask me why archives are important. Thank you. And I'll answer that they provide essential evidence to protect and enhance our rights as citizens, or I'll answer that they provide the fundamental information that supports and shapes our understanding of historical events. Then you ask me, well, how do you know that? And the only thing I can do is answer with a story, if I can even think of one right off the top of my head. I can tell you about how a Dakota woman found a 19th century enrollment register that helped secure her claim to tribal membership and all the benefits attendant to that. Or I can talk about a History Day kid who used evidence in the papers of Walter Mondale to create a standout project on the changing role of the vice presidency during that administration. These stories are important. They make things clear to people. They take the abstract explanation and they make it real. We can't get anywhere without stories. Stories that are true and impactful. Stories that demonstrate in one clear instance how archives made a difference, how archives really did change lives. These stories are our professional elevator speeches. We use those stories to make our case with our bosses, with our donors, with media reps, with legislators, with funders of all sorts. But stories are only half the equation. They are great, they are necessary, but they cannot be the only way that we convey the value of archives to people. They can't carry the load on their own. To do what they do best, they need to be supported by data. Real numbers, the evidence of many, many outcomes. Numbers of researchers served, the added social value of archives, dollars generated in the local economy, the numbers of visitors who support increased funding for NHPRC. The compelling human stories need to sit like gems on top of a real mountain of data, boring, dull, tedious numbers that, in their own way, are as compelling as the narratives that they support. And unfortunately, those data that are so necessary to us now are not the data that we have traditionally occupied ourselves in collecting. We who are so good at counting every catalog record produced and every archival folder used have been remarkably poor at counting things that might actually demonstrate the real and true value of the things that we do. Not the things we do, but the value of the things that we do. We archivists have long struggled with the challenge of demonstrating the value of archives via anything resembling objective measures. We know too little about whom we serve, how much they gain from their interactions with our holdings, and about the practical impact of our work to make an effective case about resource needs, about return on investment, about value. A big part of the problem is that in our previous attempts at gathering data, we simply have been too self-referential to answer the questions that I have just posed. Archivists just can't make a convincing case for resources by basing our arguments on who we archivists are. How many collections we hold or how many times those collections will stretch to the moon and back. No one cares. No one cares. At least no one outside of this room cares, or cares enough. Instead, we need to develop a very different understanding, one that's supported by sufficient amounts of meaningful data, an understanding of who our users are across the board, what services they value, and how they want to utilize our collections. And then crucially, which potential users we aren't serving at all. In effect, we must stop focusing on supply, what we've got, and begin focusing on demand, that is, the users of our archives and the uses to which they put them. We must shift the focus from what we do to what our users do. We must also understand the real economic impact of archives and archivists on their communities, employment, local spending, educational contributions, volunteer opportunities created, and participation in tourism. Our colleagues in museums and libraries are a couple of jumps ahead of us on this and have been grappling with these problems of economic impact and user success. The Center for the Future of Museums and its less developed protege at ALA are making some progress in amassing and then evaluating data that can buttress the stories of impact and value that they tell about their professions. Their data-driven explorations are helping them to appreciate changes in the composition and requirements of their audiences, and then helping them to see how they can address those changes to provide continuing value to those audiences. We need to go there too. To catch up to our peers who are at least beginning to understand what they do to better address their consumers and to thereby set better directions for ourselves, we archivists must begin to do several things. We need to identify data elements that are key to making this user-focused value proposition. We must find the useful data that have already been collected by archivists and other communities, including entities like IMLS and the Cultural Data Project. We must develop more thoughtful and nimble surveying strategies that allow us to keep incrementing essential data in a sustainable way. We must develop a structure to hold and manage these data to make them mashable and freely available to all repositories, archival associations, communities, and stakeholders. We must develop dashboards and similar resources that can help archivists and stakeholders make their own advocacy cases in ways that are truly compelling. Oops, it's already teed up. A couple of slides may help a little bit to illustrate what I'm trying to get at. First off is a landing page from the American Alliance of Museums that right off the bat in the area circled throws out a few important things for people to consider when they land on that page about the value proposition that museums can make across America. That circled content, which is too small, I assume, for you to read, talks about how 850 million visits to U.S. museums occur each year, more than the attendance at all major sporting events in the U.S. They tell you that museums contribute more than $21 billion to the U.S. economy overall. They tell you that 400,000 people in the U.S. are employed by museums. And they tell you that museums invest more than $2 billion a year in education. These are numbers that mean something to people who run across them. And to look at something a little different, here is the Cultural Data Project, a dashboard for the state of Minnesota, where for aggregating data for all arts and cultural organizations, they're able to tell a very meaningful story, just with numbers, about the impact of arts and culture on, in this case, the Minnesota economy. The direct financial impact created by arts and cultural organizations compared to the state government revenues that go to support those organizations. They talk about employment, full-time jobs supported in the state, about the number of volunteers that are engaged with it, about the total audiences for those organizations. So we can turn to this information and actually start talking to legislators and other funders and stakeholders. None of this is magic, but it is hard work. To get started, we have to agree on certain fundamental metrics and collect them across the archival landscape. We've done this before. We've been able to agree at some fundamental level on terminology, on the elements that are key to description, and on other defining metrics for our profession. We need to relentlessly collect, assess, and share these data once we agree on those parameters. And then those data can underlay and support the stories that we need to tell, the most important thing. And I think that if we head in this direction, we'll find willing partners in NHPRC, IMLS, NEH, and other partners. We've been fretting about relevance for nearly as long as I've been an archivist. Here's a chance to start developing the repository of data that can demonstrate relevance in a real way. How great would it be to sit down with a legislator and be able to speak convincingly about the economic returns generated by spending $1 on archives funding? or to be able to say conclusively that X number of voters were served by archival repositories in her district. So this is where I intend to double down during my presidential year, to start compiling and analyzing the data that can support and contextualize archival advocacy. In doing so, I hope to add some muscle to the great advocacy work that Kathleen has done over the past year, to really keep that effort moving forward. This is certainly not the only strategic priority that SAA has, as you've heard from Helen. Diversifying our profession and the archival record are equally important objectives, and Council will throw a lot of weight towards moving the needle in that area. But to every degree possible, I also want to amass the data, to start amassing the data anyway, that helps demonstrate the value of archives in a different way. A small team of us, supported by the SAA staff, are paving the way for a planning grant to map out the substantial work that lays ahead of us. As that planning leads to implementation, there will be roles for all SAA members to play in the years ahead. And I sincerely hope that you will all find a way to join me in this important work. Thank you.
Thank you. I hope you can see why it was really important for all three of us to take part in this leadership plenary. So, it's been a year. It has been, for me, a truly engaging and wonderful year. And I now want to sort of reflect back to what I've learned and what I hope will help us continue to direct where we're going. My first SAA meeting was in 1984, where then SAA President David Gracie addressed the assembled masses and gave his speech, Archives in Society, where he lamented the lack of understanding about archives and archivists and what we do. And then he regaled the audience and had everybody, as only David can, rolling in the aisles with the many variant misinterpretations of the word archivist. But more importantly, he urged us all to focus on raising awareness of the value of archives. Since that time, and through the efforts of previous presidents and members of SAA, there has indeed been progress in drawing attention to the value of archives and the contributions of archivists. But to be honest, I had actually thought about blocking out the stuff about the Texas Archives War, which would key you that it was not really my speech. I thought about giving David's speech and seeing if anybody noticed, number one, and number two, it's all very relevant still. We have not made anything like the progress we need to. During this year, one of the things that I did was ask every month, put out a challenge and ask you to respond or give information. One of them involved asking what people think of archives, outside people. What do they say when they see archives? What do they value in archives? Predominantly, the answers involved words like fascinating, interesting, fun, treasures. Compare those lovely words, very nice words, with those of Bishop Desmond Tutu, who made the observation to a CITRA conference that, quote, archives are the bulwark of a free society. Now, which would you rather be called, a fascinating treasure or a bulwark of freedom? We continue to focus, as in fact we must, on exploring best practices, procedures, methodology, and the operational work that we do as archivists. As a profession, we have focused long and hard on addressing challenges of appraisal, description and access, electronic records, responding to disasters, dealing with copyright, and exploring the multitude of opportunities that technology continually offers us in presenting information, creating digital collections, using social media. I know some of you are out there hitting the 140 character tweets right now, and dealing with EAD, EAC, OAIS, checksums. You can each chime in with many issues of professional practice. We need to do this work and we need to continue. But here's the concern for me. Ultimately, while it's important, productive, and we find it satisfying to address those challenges, they are alone not going to move us forward as a profession. As Daniel Garcia said yesterday, nobody wants to hear about your content DM, okay? The most sophisticated archival procedures will not ensure we have the resources and support in our archives to fulfill the important purposes for which we keep and ensure the accessibility of records. Our technical approaches will not help key opinion leaders, stakeholders, users of the public record, or users in the public to recognize the essential importance of archives. The critical need for archivists to focus attention on the primacy of awareness and advocacy for archivists led to the initiative I introduced at last year's business meeting in Washington, D.C., A Year of Living Dangerously for Archives. While the title may have seemed a bit frivolous to some or tongue-in-cheek, the intent has been entirely serious. To demonstrate to all of us that we as a profession must recognize the essential role of advocacy and awareness, and that we have the words and the data, as Dennis has suggested, to demonstrate the value and importance of archives. For me, it's been both a rewarding and a relief to see this being taken seriously by individual archivists who've responded to various challenges, to groups within SAA who've pushed forward in very demonstrable ways the efforts of the Committee on Public Awareness, the SAA office in piloting public information and a public relations campaign, and the Council's own strategic emphasis on advocacy and awareness. But in reflecting back on all that's happened in the last year that reflect advocacy and awareness efforts, whether they're connected to the initiative we did or not, it's been clear to me that our ability to sustain and expand our efforts in the future are going to be grounded in our ability to answer one essential question as sort of the start question, and then to convey our answers to a wide range of users, stakeholders, legislators, managers, the general public, in fact, to every single person we can reach. My favorite college professor, Dr. William J. Brazel, Jr., began every semester by challenging his classes with the imperative that you should only worry about the big questions, and there is only one big question. That question is why. In the context of archives, that question, the variations on that question include, why do we keep what we keep? Why should people care? Why do archives matter? No doubt, some of you are skeptical and muttering to the person next to you or tweeting out, that's really sophomoric. Why does answering the question why matter? It would have more impact for me to talk about the amazing things in our archives, to demonstrate technical sophistication in providing access. So let me share with you some thoughts from a very compelling and cogent approach that originated in a TED Talk by Simon Sinek, who later followed that with his book, Start With Why. Sinek observes that most people can talk about what they do and how they do it. Many fewer can explain why. Yet talking about why is what leads us to be inspired about what we do, and then to inspire others to understand, to value, and support it. Archives are, in fact, and in reality, the essential evidence of our society. So it is absolutely critical that an even and representative archival record first survives, then is available to all any and all possible users. So indeed, archives and archivists need to be understood, valued, and supported. People who are inspired, who inspire others, are the ones who have real impact and accomplish real change. I want to give you a quick story. At the turn of the 20th, and it's an Ohio story, at the turn of the 20th century, Samuel Pierpont Langley, a senior officer at the Smithsonian Institution, mathematics professor at Harvard, and an all-around super smart guy, was driven by the desire to be the first to achieve human flight. With $50,000 from the War Department, a handsome sum then, support from Andrew Carnegie and Alexander Graham Bell, he assembled the dream team of educated, talented minds. His team was followed everywhere by press who were awaiting his achievements. They were going to capture the moment. You've probably never heard of Samuel Pierpont Langley, but you do know about Orville and Wilbur Wright, the Ohio bicycle-owning brothers, or they owned the bicycle shop, who were self-funded, assembled a small team with not one college degree on it. You know how the story ends. The Wright brothers achieved human flight. What did they have that Langley didn't have? They knew why they wanted to do this. They believed passionately, read their work, passionately that flight would change the world, and they inspired their team to share that dream and achieve that goal. Upon hearing of their flight at Kitty Hawk, Langley quit, discontinued his efforts, walked away. He was after the what. He wanted to be first. He did not have a goal. He did not know why. People want to be inspired. Current and very fascinating neurological research that Tom Owen referred to yesterday supports and demonstrates this. The human brain literally is motivated by something called the limbic brain. And I start doing this stuff, so excuse my bizarre behaviors. Not the neocortex, which is the rational portion of the brain, but the limbic brain, which is, as it were, the heart of heart and mind. We need to employ the rational part of the brain, as Dennis has referred to, for the data and evidence that will support when we talk about the value of archives. But we also need to reach people in their heart, otherwise known as their limbic brain. That's where true commitment comes from. It's an almost nonverbal part of our brain from where we develop that. Commitment, as all of you Mets fans like Peter Walsh know, is not entirely based on rationality. And we all have those commitments. Rationally based on facts and figures, we can have things thrown in front of us where it's hard to make the case to a resource allocator or a taxpayer or to particularly certain members of Congress for the cost that it takes to keep thousands of boxes of records for decades, in fact for centuries, in fact forever, based on the idea that they might be used. Hard one to ask. It's just our educated guess. And even when they are, how much use justifies how much cost? We get asked that and we start to freeze. We're asking people in institutions to invest in staffing, in facility and stewardship costs that last literally forever. There are indeed some ways to represent cost savings and return on investment, and there is important data. But we have to start with why. We have to capture people's hearts, wherever your heart is, in your heart or in your head. We have to capture that connection first, then the data will make much more sense. It's critical that we get people's attention first and get them to listen. And to do that, we need to convince them of the value of archives. Archives and the essential work of archivists can very much be justified and explained to others effectively in a compelling way that speaks to the limbic brain or your heart when we talk about why. Once we've caught people's hearts with why, then we can make a more effective address on the rational issues of how and what archives and archivists are and do. It provides the groundwork. You know, Dennis and I are giving you the two pieces that fit together to make the case for archives. Gaining support and understanding takes that multi-threaded approach, and the string that we have most neglected is the one that perhaps I think could be the strongest fiber, the impact and outcomes of the uses of archives, the demonstration of why archives matter. We have answers and stories, and I've heard many of those over the past year that tell why. Several of the challenges that we've put forward have taken different routes to get us to use our words about why archives matter. Here are a few brief examples of what we told each other over the past year were the reasons why archives matter. First, archives provide essential evidence. We all agree with that, I think. Archives protect the rights and privileges of people in our society. They hold government accountable. They ensure transparency. Those are fine words to appeal to the rational mind, but what does that mean in reality? National Public Radio featured an investigative story this June about secret experiments during World War II in which the U.S. military conducted tests exposing African American, Japanese American, and Puerto Rican troops to chemical weapons. The story actually originally broke in 1991, and the Veterans Administration promised it would provide benefits to the veterans injured in the mustard gas experiments. More than 20 years later, however, they had contacted only 610 of over 4,000 veterans maintaining that the test records were incomplete and others could not be identified. We don't know who they are. We can't find them. However, NPR's research librarian Barbara Van Workum found her way to records at the National Archives that in fact led reporters to virtually all of those veterans. Demands for an apology and further action have been introduced in Congress. The essential evidence to substantiate these experiments and prove literally the names, faces, and health impact on those veterans is critical to the core issue of government accountability. Another reason why you all said archives are important, why we need archives, is because archives support the creation of new knowledge. Archives are the raw material of research. They foster discovery, give voice to previous perspectives, support our ability to learn from the past. Again, what does that mean in reality? What practical outcomes result from this? Oops, no, there, okay, sorry. What practical outcomes come from this? USGS research geologist Bruce Malonia is part of an international effort to study change in glaciers. Drawing from historic images and data from archives like the National Snow and Ice Data Center's Berry Archives, Molnia's research goal is to provide unequivocal, unambiguous visual documentation of the effects of changing climate and to share this information as broadly as possible. This is a man with a why mission. His research in archives has done just that. It resulted in a published study, Glaciers in Alaska. One pair of the archival images, these two, look at the difference between the same day, many years difference. He located these images, and more than 400 times this has been reproduced, including on refrigerator magnets. Another dozen of his images are the basis of a National Center for Atmospheric Research game designed to raise public awareness about climate change. Further, he has served as a senior legislative fellow to the U.S. Senate, focusing on policy issues and pushing that archival data out to the Senate, who even the Senate can look at this and understand the reality. And hopefully that won't get me fired. None of that could have happened without archives or archivists. Literally, none of that could have happened without archives and archivists. Third reason why you all found archives are of value. Archives provide a laboratory for students to understand the human experience, and some of you attended the pre-conference talking about using historical records in the classroom. With all the emphasis on STEM education, it bears noting that, in fact, archival records are the laboratory, the raw material for students to study the behavior and reactions of as humans interact in different times and spaces. Critical thinking, consideration of different perspectives, perhaps a little cultural competency can be developed in our students. Contact with real voices and experiences are a potent educational tool that archives and archivists can provide. To give you an example, a rather desultory, not very interested Tallahassee high school student was assigned to do a History Day project. He used records relating to the investigation of murders at Florida State University by serial killer Ted Bundy to do his research on changes in victim rights laws resulting from those murders. The project won at the state level and went on to compete in National History Day. That project had a tremendous impact on this young man. He suddenly became a much better student, went off to college, continued his interest in doing research, went on to complete law school, passed the Florida bar, and today is practicing law in Florida. Archives changed one life for sure in Florida, and a good life change. And now let me give you a final answer to why, or one last example. Archives are extremely important to cultural heritage for communities. An often expressed value for archives is giving voice to the experience of a wider range of individuals and groups in our society, beyond the great white male politicians who could read, write, and leave a documentary record. Again, a worthwhile purpose, but it becomes more compelling it was for me particularly when I saw it from the perspective of a person whose community has in fact been largely silent in our history. I want to share with you a very touching email I received this year after I did a talk about Archives Matter at the Center for Jewish History. I got an email from a young archival colleague, Richard Jung Lee, about the value to non-archivists of what we have and what we do. Richard's email said, I quote, "I enjoyed your remark on trying to explain why archives matter to a Korean businessman. That Korean businessman who is an insurmountable barrier of language and customs is actually my own father, who to this day is not entirely knowledgeable about my profession. This probably has to do with my lack of a strong Korean vocabulary and the faulty way in which fathers often communicate with their son and vice versa. Regardless, he too believes that history can move people and through its exploration enrich lives. Lately, in our heart-to-heart conversations at night, he chides me in a low voice, and I will be culturally respectful enough not to mangle the Korean language. What that statement says is, write a book. Tell them our story. A book that cannot exist without archives or archivists." There are other stories, other reasons why archives matter. I've shared just a few of those with you to get you a sense of this, and particularly following on yesterday's plenary on storytelling, I hope you are sitting there and saying to yourself, I know that. I can do that. Not such a big deal. I can do that. The essential component to this, however, is not just that we know the value of archives, it's what we do to share that with others, to share with others what we do know. For many of us, the real act of living dangerously is to go beyond the facts of what we have in our archives or how we preserve and make it accessible. We need to talk about the outcomes and values. Even with all the data that Dennis and others help us amass, if we don't talk about it, it's just, as he said, a heap of data. We need to get out of the archivists make it last longer mode, put it to rest, bury it, don't say it again, and reach to the heart. Yes, never, I'll cross my lips again. And reach to the heart of the matter and talk about why archives. We need to make opportunities to do this, online, live, in writing, anywhere and everywhere we can. We cannot wait around for someone to buttonhole us in an elevator and ask, so what's an archives? What's an archivist? I got in the elevator with 3 Cleveland Browns guys last night. You know, they preened, they posed, they didn't ask me what I did, okay? Isn't gonna happen all the time. I obviously was not a football player, so what was I? We need to make opportunities to do this, online, live, etc. We cannot wait for our bosses to ask what the archives actually contributes and why it needs resources. We cannot wait patiently for researchers to find our websites or come to our repositories. We have to step forward and engage. That may mean providing others with the opportunities and stories to speak for archives. That may mean speaking out to our legislators, to students and teachers, to communities, to our resource allocators, or even to our own families, like Richard did with his father. If we do not seek out ways to draw attention to the value and importance of archives and archivists, then in truth, I believe there will be consequences in time that we will all need to own. One of my favorite quotations from my dark, soul-searching days in college was Nietzsche's claim that God is dead and we have killed him, you and I. If we do not take advocacy and awareness of the value of archives as a regular, essential, and compelling role for each of us, then we can claim our own version of this. Archives are dead, and we have killed them, you and I. Librarians, digital humanitarians, historians, information officers, some other new profession with some other name, will subsume archives and will subsume what we do. SAA has a leading role in providing resources, gathering the data, serving as a network for ideas, and in doing some of the public relations and speaking out for archives. But don't be mistaken, it's not just about SAA doing it. It is an every archivist, every place, every day issue. We all have to step up and find the ways in which we will contribute. Each of us, personally and professionally, needs to make a concerted, concentrated commitment, not just for a year. I lured you in, it's more than a year, but as a regular component of our work. This is not an age-based, experience-based, institutional type, or personality-type specific need. There's not certain kinds of people who can do it and certain ones who don't have to. Each of us means precisely that. Every single one of us can contribute and must contribute in some way. It will take work, and we need to step up and do that work. Make that commitment for ourselves and in our professional organization. It is not somebody else's to do. It's not, let Helen and Dennis and Kathleen and Stephen do it. It's something we all have to do. I want to end with a personal story about the importance of making a commitment. My father, Jack E. Roe, was a 24-year-old radio operator with the Army's 96th Infantry during World War II in the Pacific. His captain, Joe McCaffrey, was a committed leader of men who strove to ensure their safety as much as humanly possible. So he was actually known for taking considerable risks, but revered by his men for trying to lay communication lines that would provide critical information to help keep them safe. After losing 2 radio operators and 2 wiremen in one single day at Kakazoo Ridge, his sergeant came into headquarters tent with the assignment to choose the next men to go out with the captain. The sergeant hung his head and said, "Expletives deleted. I promised Nancy no expletives. Somebody's got to go out with captain. I don't want to have to do this. I don't want to have to choose. You could get killed going out with him." And silence reigned. Then my loyal father emitted a few expletives of his own and said, "I'll go. I can't let the old man down." Charlie Cunningham, one of the wiremen, followed with, "If Roe goes, I go." With the captain in the lead and under tremendous fire, they laid wire a long, long way out that day and communicated information back that, according to Joe McCaffrey, who's actually the one who told me the story 50 years later, saved many, many lives. Joe said to me, "We'll never know how many guys lived to get married, to have kids, to make accomplishments and contributions. We'll never know how they contributed to the world because of what your dad and Charlie did when they got those communication lines out there. But they did it. They changed lives." And I'm telling you this story because it is one that inspires me. It touches my limbic brain. It spurs me on in my own little ways to step up sometimes, even when those times are rarely convenient or safe, not knowing what will the entire impact be, just that if I step up, it can make a difference. It may be a small change in knowledge. It may be information that makes a huge change to lives, but no matter, it makes a difference each and every time. Archives have impact. Archives matter. And it is up to us to show people the truth of that, to give them the opportunity and benefit of what archives can do. We all, each of us, need to step forward and take action on behalf of archives, on behalf of our profession, on behalf of our society. The time is now. The choice is yours. What will you do? Thank you. I hate that. Thank you all for attending. Thank you all. You know, when I did this, I thought, well, maybe people will support it. Maybe everyone will think I'm goofy. But I did it. I did my step forward. I truly hope you will do so. My beloved daughter, Kate, is sitting down there, and under her feet she has a bag. If you didn't get one of my Live Dangerously for Archives wristbands and would like one, you can have it if you will do something, anything this year, and you can come get one from Kate, or she'll be around by the door. But I do honestly hope you will all go forward for the next hours that you're here, for the next days, and try to engage on behalf of Archives. We can change the world. Thank you all.